It's not every week that you see a series of major policy announcements just completely reshape the landscape of trade, elections, and foreign policy all at once. But, well, this past week was exactly that. So let's dive in and try to make some sense of this absolute flurry of proclamations and executive orders that came out of the White House. And that's really the big question we're tackling here, right? We're going to break down these pretty significant shifts piece by piece to really get a handle on the strategy and the stated goals behind them. I mean, the sheer volume of these actions was pretty remarkable. Just look at the key phrases that were suddenly all over the headlines. First, we saw this massive tariff announced, aimed squarely at the entire pharmaceutical industry. Then, almost out of nowhere, a new federal role in compiling lists for state election officials. A brand new military operation was launched, and it came with some very clearly defined and unwavering objectives. And there was also an executive order to address what the administration is calling a chaotic state of affairs in college athletics. Yeah, really. And finally, a new communication tool promising a direct line from the administration right to the public. It was, without a doubt, a week designed to project action on a whole lot of fronts. All right, let's start with the economy, because this is where the administration framed its biggest moves, and they did it through the lens of national security. The key legal tool they used here is one that's become, well, pretty prominent in trade talks lately. And this is it, Section 232. This law actually goes all the way back to 1962, and it gives the president some really broad authority to impose tariffs if imports are seen as a threat to national security. And this week, we saw it get used in two major ways. First up, a massive 100% tariff on imported patented medicines. The administration's proclamation talked about an over-reliance on foreign supply chains for life-saving drugs. So what's the stated goal? To bring production and research back home, onshoring it, to make sure the U.S. isn't vulnerable if global supply chains get disrupted. Second, we saw the exact same logic applied to strategic metals. A new 50% flat tariff was placed on the full value of imported items made of things like steel, aluminum, or copper. And the rationale here is pretty similar: protect domestic industries that are considered vital for defense and infrastructure. Now, what's so interesting when you see it laid out like this is how it just lays the strategy bare. Look at it. In both pharmaceuticals and metals, the justification is national security. The tool is a hefty tariff, and the goal is to boost domestic production. The tariff rates are different, sure, but the underlying playbook? It's identical. It shows a really consistent approach to using trade policy to achieve strategic economic goals. Okay, so let's shift gears now from international trade to domestic policy. Because in the very same week, we saw executive orders that were aimed at fundamentally reshaping the rules for two major American institutions: federal elections and college sports. So on election integrity, a new executive order outlines this four-step process. It tells federal agencies, we're talking Homeland Security and the Social Security Administration, to compile lists of confirmed citizens and then send them to the states. It also orders the Postal Service to create new rules for mail-in ballots, things like unique tracking codes. And this part is crucial. It gives the Attorney General the power to prioritize enforcement and to potentially withhold federal funds from states that don't comply. And a very similar approach was taken with college athletics. The administration identifies the problem as a financial arms race that's been caused by lawsuits creating all this chaos. The proposed solution? It uses an enforcement mechanism that sounds a lot like the elections order, threatening to withhold federal grants and contracts from universities that violate rules on things like player transfers and these pay-for-play schemes. And that brings us to the third major theme of the week, and that's this projection of strength, both in foreign military operations and in domestic communications. The messaging was all about clarity, decisiveness, and control. This tone was set directly by the president in his address to the nation on Operation Epic Fury. I mean, this quote leaves absolutely no room for ambiguity, right? It lays out a series of direct, action-oriented objectives about Iran. So here's the thing. These four objectives were repeated almost word for word by every major official involved, from the vice president and the secretary of state, all the way down to military commanders. If you read the White House press release, it's just a long list of these quotes, which really shows a remarkable level of messaging discipline. The goal was clearly to present a consistent, unwavering set of military goals to the public. But that idea, projecting strength through clear, direct communication, wasn't just limited to foreign policy. It was also the driving force behind a new tool designed to completely reshape how the administration talks to the American people. The administration launched a new official White House app, and according to the announcement, its whole purpose is to cut through the noise of the traditional media and deliver unfiltered, real-time updates straight from the source. It's being positioned as a direct line from the Oval Office right to your phone. So, when you put all these pieces together, the tariffs, the executive orders, the military operations, the new communication tools, what is the big picture here? Well, it really seems like the administration is trying to connect all of these actions directly to its vision for the country and its people. And this is how it all connects back. The broad economic strategy, like the tariffs, is framed as part of a much larger effort to benefit American workers. The White House is pointing to initiatives like the Working Families Tax Cuts, highlighting things like no tax on tips and overtime, and they're featuring headlines like this one to show that these policies are having a direct, positive impact. And that leaves us with this final thought. A week of rapid, transformative action on trade, elections, sports, and foreign policy, it certainly makes a statement. The question it raises, and the one we're all left to think about, is what the long-term consequences of rewriting so many rules so quickly will be for the country and for its role on the world stage.